and develop rapidly in their first 5 years across the 4 main areas of development. These areas are motor, language and communication, cognitive and social or emotional. Cognitive development means how children think, explore and figure things out. It is the development of knowledge, skills, problem solving and dispositions, which help children to think about and understand the world around them. Brain development is part of cognitive development. Jean Piaget was a Swiss psychologist known for his work on child development. He developed his theory from detailed observations of infants and children, most especially his own 3 children. Piaget made significant contributions to the understanding of how children think about the world around them and shifted the view of children's thinking from that of little adults to something quite different from adult thinking. He believed that children form mental concepts or schemes as they experience new situations and events. For example, if a parent points to a picture of an apple and tells his child that it's an apple, the child forms a scheme for apple that looks something like that picture. In other words, scheme is a mental concept or a mental map formed through experiences with objects or events. Piaget also believed that children first try to understand new things in terms of already existing schemas, a process he called assimilation. The child might see an orange and say it's an apple, because both are round. When corrected, the child might alter the scheme for an apple to include round and red. The process of altering or adjusting old schemas to fit new information and experiences is termed as accommodation. Piaget gave 4 distinct stages of cognitive development that occur from infancy to adolescence. These stages are: it concerns infants from birth to age 2. In this stage, infants use their senses and motor abilities to learn about the world around them. At first, infants only have involuntary reflexes present at birth to interact with objects and people. As their sensory motor development progresses, they begin to interact deliberately with objects by grasping, pushing, tasting, and so on. Infants move from simple repetitive actions such as grabbing their toes to complex actions such as trying to put a shape into a sorting box. Near the end of this stage, infants develop a sense of object permanence. Object permanence is the knowledge that an object exists even when it is not in sight. For example, the game of peekaboo is important in teaching infants that his mother's smiling face is always going to be behind her hands. This is a critical step in developing language, as words themselves are symbols of things that may not be present. Symbolic thought, which is the ability to represent objects in one's thoughts with symbols such as words, become possible by the end of this stage. This stage concerns children of ages 2 to 7. It is an age of developing languages and concepts. Children who can now move freely about in their world no longer have to rely on sense and motor skills, but now can ask questions. They can now explore their surroundings more fully. Pretending and make-believe play becomes possible because children at this stage can understand through symbolic thinking that a line of wooden blocks can stand in for a train. However, they are not yet capable of logical thought. That is, they can use simple mental concepts but are not able to use those concepts in a more rational or a logical sense. They tend to be overwhelmed by what they see. So when children of this age see Santa Claus in a book or a television, then he becomes real to them. It doesn't occur to them to think about how Santa Claus might get to every child's house in one night or why those toys are the same ones as they saw in the store last week. Another limitation is egocentrism, which is the inability to see the world through anyone else's eyes except one's own. For a pre-operational child, everyone else must see what he sees, and what is important to the child must be important to everyone else. Remember that children in this age are also overwhelmed by appearances. A child who complains that his piece of pie is smaller than his brother's may be quite happy once his original piece is cut into 2 pieces, since now he thinks that he has more than his brother. He has focused only on the number of pieces, not the actual amount of the pie. Focusing only on one feature of some object rather than taking all feature consideration is called centration. Centration is one of the reasons why children in this stage often fail to understand that changing the way something looks does not change its substance. The ability to understand that altering the appearance of something does not change its amount, its volume, or its mass is called conservation. Children in this stage at conservation not only because they centrate but also because they are unable to mentally reverse actions. This stage concerns the children of ages 7 to 12. Children finally become capable of conservation and reversible thinking. Centration no longer occurs as children become capable of considering all the relevant features of any given object. They begin to think more logically about beliefs such as Santa Claus and ask questions, eventually coming to their own rational conclusions about the fantasies of early childhood. They are in school, learning all sorts of science and maths. They are becoming convinced that they know more than their parents. In fact, they become so logical and focused on the rules that they find it difficult to alter them. Their thinking is set in concrete. This concrete thinking is the major limitation of this stage. Children in this stage are unable to deal effectively with abstract concepts. Abstract concepts are those that do not have some physical or touchable reality. For example, freedom is an abstract concept. People can define what freedom is, but there is nothing that they can point and say, "This is freedom." Concrete concepts, which are kind of concepts understood by children of this age, are about objects, written rules, and real things. Children need to be able to see things or touch it to be able to understand it. The last stage of cognitive development defined by Piaget include children from ages 12 to adulthood. In this stage, abstract thinking becomes possible. Teenagers not only understand concepts that have no physical reality, but also they get deeply involved in hypothetical thinking or thinking about possibilities of even impossibilities. Piaget did not believe that everyone would necessarily reach formal operations. Studies show that only half of all adults in the United States reach formal operations. That does not mean that adults who do not develop this type of thinking are somehow less intelligent. It simply means that they use more practical kind of intelligence. Educators have put Piaget's ideas into practice by allowing children to learn at their own pace, by hands-on experience with objects, and by teaching concepts to children that are at an appropriate cognitive level. There is no doubt that Piaget's theory of cognitive theory is a pioneer in child psychology and is still being taught in various curriculums. It is relevant to both educators as well as parents.